All right, welcome back to Long Island's #1 pro wrestler broadcast, Monte The Pharaoh, where we have the great Jim Brunzell, future Hall of Famer. We're going a little ghetto, Jim, and I appreciate you joining us. Like we told on the first show, our producer of many years has resigned as he got another job, and the studio couldn't get me a fill-in in time. So, as everybody knows, Jimmy's in Florida. I'm here in my man cave in New York. I'll be back in studio next week. But before we get going, first of all, Jim, you don't age, dude. Like every time I see you, you get younger and younger and younger.
Well, I want to tell you the reason why. Whoops. Did that count? Did it sound okay?
Yeah, you're okay.
Okay. The reason why is because I've taken supplements for probably 50 years, and I take probably 24 capsules a day. And when I go see my doctor for my annual physical, and he checks me out and everything, and he says, you know, Jim, he says, one thing I know for sure. And I said, what's that, Dr. Albers? And he says, you have the most expensive urine in St. Paul, Minnesota. So that's, you know, I have a friend who's been helping me for 20 some years. He's a very good nutritionalist, and he was a former power lifter, and he knows everything, you know, what to take and this and that. And I had a little about with atrial fibrillation, and so there's no more stimulants in my life, so I have to be very careful about that. And I had a couple deals where my heart went up to 158 heartbeat, and they had to jumpstart my heart a couple times. And so I just said, you know, I no more rock star and no more cocaine. So I'm just kidding.
Okay now.
My wife said, don't say that. Yeah.
But I gotta tell you, like every time I speak to you, you're sharp. You look good. It's just, it really is pretty amazing, man. I'm always, you know, me and Jimmy speak. We're like, dude, I don't think I'm making it to 65, much less. And you know what I mean? And it's like, they see guys like you. I'm like, holy cow, I got to figure out what these dudes are doing. First of all, I want to thank you real quick. Is anytime I call on Jim Brunzell, he's there for us. And that means the world to us. You're one of our favorite people. And we really want to just say that to you. It just means the world to us.
Well, thank you very much. I enjoy these, you know. I enjoy coming on and talking and reminiscing. And you know, my fans, you know, they're still out there. You know, I just turned 75 last week. So,
liar. He's lying.
No, August 13th, 1949. Wow. And you know, we had a nice quiet dinner, my wife and I and my kids, you know, and celebrated. And you know, life's a gift, and you have to make the most of it. And I've tried to do so. And I was so thankful that I survived the professional wrestling journey, you know, for 27 years, because that killed a lot of people, that business.
Sure has.
I got to say, because I think I think the lifespan of a wrestler has got to be like maybe 50, considering everything that you guys have gone through between, you know, the juice and the amphetamines or whatever bullshit, you know, you had to do to survive in the industry. Just real quick, before we get going on you, okay. We were talking before we started. We had a side conversation. So everybody out there, you know, everybody knows how much Jimmy and I love Mr. Bob Backlund, and up here in the WWE, he was a hero to all of us. And Jimmy was saying,
we hated him. Wait a minute. We were always rooting against him.
Well, yeah, but now, right?
Oh, of course he is. But back in the day, we were begging for them to take the strap off of him. Go ahead. We love him. Go ahead.
So Jimmy was telling myself and Jim that he had heard that Backlund was living in Panama City and he would love to go see him. Yeah. And, you know, if anybody's aware, Bob probably isn't doing the best. But, you know, Mr. Brunzell was talking about Bob Backlund. He was calling him Bobby, and we were just bullshitting. And we were talking about the day Backlund lost to the Iron Sheik. And then there was a strange turn to the conversation. I said, we got to stop the conversation now because what the great Jim Brunzell is about to say is news to me. So I'm going to set the table because I got to hear the story now. So if everybody understands, Jimmy and I, like many WWF guys, grew up here hating Bob Backlund. I think we were the original.
Our entire junior high into high school, 5.5 years, the man was champion, turning back the likes of Greg the Hammer Valentine, Magnificent Morocco, Sergeant Slaughter, for God's sakes. He was taking them all down, Mike.
And Killer Khan.
The Mongolian. Yep.
So, when the Iron Sheik came to the WWE, and there was a second round there, everybody was like, forget this. This is a waste of time. Because I think he had just beaten the Masked Superstar who we thought had a chance. And we always thought someone had a chance.
Adrian Adonis had a chance.
Right. So the list is long. So fast forward, the match is set. No one's watching. It's a waste of our time. I'm at my girlfriend's house, and in the Daily News, this little caption.
I was watching.
Yeah, which is crazy. I don't even know why you were.
Because it's wrestling. I love wrestling. Okay.
So in this little caption, it has, Iron Sheik defeats Bob Backlund for the title. And I'm like, what? So I said, so I'm telling that story to Jim, and Jim's like, I don't think Backlund knew what was going to happen. I said, stop, because I've never heard this. So Jim, I'm turning it over to you, man.
Well, now this is what I heard through a lot of the boys. Okay. First of all, Hulk Hogan had just left Minnesota to come to New York. There's no way that they're going to have Hulk Hogan beat Bobby Backlund. It just wouldn't. First of all, it wouldn't have been a good match, and then second of all, you don't have a baby face beat another baby face, and he would have to beat him 1, 2, 3. So they thought Khosrow Vaziri, the Iron Schnook, would be a good. He would be good in there. So what happened was, and this is what I heard. I never talked to Bob about it, but he was surprised. What happened was they had a good match, and blah 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 blah. And the next thing you know, Khosrow puts the camel clutch on him, and his manager, who I just forgot his name again.
Skolin.
Arnold Skolin threw the towel in. So they rang the bell, and that was it. So Khosrow won, and then 2 weeks later he got beat by the Hulk, whatever it was. So, and Bobby just I don't think he knew. And they had done this. Vince had done this. Vince McMahon Jr. had done that, with Shawn Michaels and Bret Hart. And it was, but, I'll say this, Bobby made a ton of money. Bob Backlund made, probably, I would say, $3.5-4 million in that time period. Maybe more.
Really?
He saved his money, honest God. He saved his money since he was down in Dallas, Texas. I gotta tell you a quick story. In 1974, I was in Kansas City wrestling in the Central States, and I was working for Bob Geigel and Pat O'Connor, and you wrestled every single night, twice a night, and I was just starting. So Bob Backlund was coming down from Minnesota, and he was going to go to Texas. So he wrestled in Kansas City, and he said, Jim, do you think I can stay with you at your apartment? And I says, Bob, I got a 1-bedroom efficiency, and I got 2 double air mattresses, and I will be glad to blow one up for you. So he says, okay. So we had some matches in Kansas City. Then we come back, and Bob could drink a case of beer.
Really?
He loved that. He didn't do any drugs, nothing, but he could drink a case of beer. Just boom, 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 boom. So I blow the double bed up. I'm in the one side of the room, and he's on the other. And in the morning, he got up and he says, "Jim," he says, "that doggone air mattress," he says, "had a hole in it." He said, "I slept on the floor all night." So he had to get up in the morning and drive to Dallas. Oh, and I felt so bad, but I didn't know that it had a hole in it, because I had very seldom any guests. But I got to tell you another thing too. When I first went into WWE, it was June 26, 1985. They flew me in, and I came in and went into Poughkeepsie, and that's where they did their TV. So Gene Okerlund, who I'd known from the AWA for a long time, and a great interview and a great guy. So he was going to do an interview with me, just a normal babyface interview to, start out my run in WWE. So he's asking me questions, and I there's no braggadocio with me, and I'm an athlete type wrestler and everything. And as I got done with the interview, as I walk away, I hear Vince McMahon says, "Oh God, we got another Backlund here." And he said that, and I looked, and I thought, "Holy Christ!" I said, "That's a great way to start the relationship."
Was that like the curse of death? Like, oh no.
And I almost turned around and said, "Well, if I can have the strap for 5 years, it won't be bad."
That's right. Yeah, give me that $4 million. I got to ask you now that you're talking with Backlund's drinking all his beer. Did you ever experience Backlund drunk? Like, what is a drunk Bob Backlund like?
He was a happy drunk.
Really?
He was.
Okay.
He never got violent. He never got. He was just laugh, and he just sort of, it was good. And he drank a case of beer.
Let me ask you this: being from the AWA and Backlund's in the WWF, again, there's no internet, obviously, and is the word over? Like, I can't believe they're using him as their champion, or was it like that guy's really great? I mean, what were the other wrestlers saying about that?
Well, it was early on in the WWE, Mike, and the deal was, Bob Backlund had all the credentials. I mean, he was, a national champion in Division, 1 or 2, North Dakota. He was a bona fide wrestling phenomenon. He was, and he was good. And I think most of the guys in the business realized that, if somebody's got those credentials and he can speak a little bit, on the microphone, and he can draw money, well, let's go with it. And I thought he did a good job. And it's hard. The WWE was so hard because there were, especially after Hulk got there, and then there was 60 guys there, and they ran 3 towns a night, and it was just a free for all, and everybody wanted to do this, and they wanted to be this guy, and they wanted to make this much money, and it was a chaos. And Vince, he didn't give a shit. And George Scott, I want to say God rest his soul, but at the same time, he was the worst booker I've ever met in my life. George Scott was horrible.
Why was he horrible?
Well,
why was he horrible?
It was horrible because all he wanted to do this was his method to success. I'm going to book the guys every single night. I'm not going to give them a day off. And that way they can't complain. So that's what he did. When I wrestled in, North Carolina, it was a Mid-Atlantic. Cosro and I did a deal, and I was a Mid-Atlantic champion. I wound up losing to him with his loaded boot on TV. So 2 weeks later, I'm going to wrestle him in Greensboro, North Carolina, wherever it is. So everybody's built up for this match, and I've got his loaded boot, the one with the curly toe on it. So I come in to the locker room that night, and Sandy Scott, George Scott's brother, was the agent at the town. And he said, "Did you get the finish from George?" And I said, "No." I said, "What is it?" And he says, George wants you to do an hour draw. And I said, what? And he said, an hour draw. I said, Sandy, I said, I'm a baby face. I got his boot on and I can't beat him in an hour. I says, you might as well dig a hole in the middle of the ring and bury Jim Brunzell because I will be dead, for drawing money. And we did the hour and it was putrid. It was horrible. And I thought, oh my God. And I had to do a couple more, 2 or 3 more hour draws with Khosrow. And the last one I did got me fired. We were in I think it was Anderson, South. No, it wasn't Anderson. It was someplace in South Carolina. It was an Indian reservation. And they had maybe 1,200 people in the audience. So Sandy Scott comes up to me and he says, George wants you and Khosrow to do an hour draw. I said, are you kidding? An hour draw in 1,200 people? And he says, yeah. So we're going to do an hour draw. So we're having a match, and all of a sudden both of us go outside and Khosrow says, oh. I said, what's the matter? He said, I hurt my back. I said, did you really hurt your back? And he said, yeah. So he's limping around. So we're fighting outside.
That was the Undertaker. That was the Undertaker. That was the American Badass passing by the house. Go on.
That's what happens when you're not in studio.
Yeah.
Live TV, baby. Jim, we digress.
So what happened was we're both outside, and I said we'll get counted out. So we take a 10 count, and nobody wins. So the next morning I get a call.
Especially the fans.
Yeah, that's for sure. So, they're lucky they only saw 40 minutes. The last 20 minutes would have really been horrible.
Oh, boy.
So, next morning, I get a call from George Scott's secretary, and they said, Jim, George wants to talk to you. Can you come in the office? So I go into the office, and he says to me, he said, Jimmy, he says, weren't you supposed to do an hour last night? And I said, yeah. I said, I was going to do an hour. I said, but Khosrow said he hurt his back. And he said, no, he didn't. He told me he didn't hurt his back.
Oh,
so
here we go.
He fired me that day. George Scott did. He said, I got to let you go. And I said, George, I said, thank you. I said, because I can't wait to get the hell out of here. I said,
did you give a little call? Did you give a little phone call to Sheiky, baby?
You know what? That I talked to Sheik. And then we had to work with him in New York. And then nobody trusted him, and God bless him and God rest his soul. He was so bad off in chemical addiction. It was unbelievable. I mean, he drank a case of beer a day, smoked 2 or 3 joints, and he'd do an 8-ball of coke a day.
And lived till 80, right?
Yeah. And
go figure.
I'd say, Jesus, Khosrow, please. And he lost his. How about when him and Duggan got stuck going to Asbury Park, New Jersey? They're working against each other, and they're driving together, and they're speeding, and they get stopped, and they got an 8-ball of coke.
Yeah,
Jim. By the way, Jim, we had the cop that arrested them on the show. We listened to the story.
It was great. He actually felt guilty afterwards. He's like, because when Sheik was like, "It's me, the Iron Sheik," and he thought that he was going to get off, and the cop's like, "Well, now that I know your name, I got to take care of the rest because there's an 8-ball of coke in your boot." He was like, "What is he supposed to do? What is he supposed to do?"
And here it just blew everything apart. I mean, and Vince sort of didn't want guys traveling together, and he says, "Hey, we're doing good business here. Everybody's making money. Don't blow it by stupid thing like that." And they did, and I thought, oh my God. And then I don't think they fired either one of them, but they gave them both like 2 weeks off. And then they just kept going, but they didn't work against each other too much.
Right.
They could have been tag team partners.
If I remember right, guys, they were really pushing Duggan. He was against Andre. That destroyed Duggan's run there. That definitely killed him off a little bit.
Well, I want to tell you what happened. You know, in WrestleMania 3, Brian Blair and I, the Killer Bees, were against Khosrow and Joe Bernarczyk,
Nikolai
Nikolai
Volkov.
Volkov. So,
Joe.
yes, Joe. So we're in the match, and it was a hell of a card and a hell of a
Oh yeah. Oh yeah.
was good and everything. I mean, 97,000 people there.
Great.
So what happens? Jim Duggan comes in with his 2x4 and gets us disqualified, and we're supposed to be happy and congratulate him. And I thought, you got to be kidding me. We had him beat 3 times. They jumped in and out and fouled us. And then Duggan comes in, with a cat, and we're supposed to say, oh, God dang, Jimmy, thank you so much. And I thought,
wait, I got to ask a question now that you bring it up.
Who
got paid more, the Killer Bees or Hacksaw Jim Duggan for that match? Who got paid more, the Killer Bees or Hacksaw Jim Duggan?
I think we all, everybody underneath got 10 grand.
Oh, a blanket.
So wait a minute. Duggan running in with a 2x4 for 1 minute got paid the same amount of money as you did for wrestling 25.
Yeah,
cheap guy.
I think Hulk got $1 million, Andre got $1 million, and there was a couple guys that got 200,000. The guys leading up to that, semifinal match. It might have been Steamboat.
Savage and Steamboat, probably, right?
Yeah, and Savage what a great talent he was, and so was Ricky Steamboat. Ricky Steamboat at that time he was the best babyface in the business. He was incredible. He could wrestle. An hour. I saw him do 2 or 3 hour draws with Ric Flair in North Carolina. Wow. And it was just spectacular. Every night, I mean, Ricky was a great guy too. Good guy. I hope he's doing well now. I saw him a couple of years ago at one of those wrestling deals, and he looked good. And I don't know.
He was on the show about 6 months ago, Jim. He looks great. Great guy. Listen, I got to ask you about this. Last week or 2 weeks ago, we lost the great Kevin Sullivan. Did you have any relationship with Kevin? If so, could you tell us a little bit about it?
I like Kevin. When I was leaving North Carolina, I was booked in Atlanta the last 6 weeks, and Kevin was there, and he was such a character, and I mean the drugs were pretty rampant in Atlanta, and Kevin's a great guy and a very good worker, and we got along very well. And I'm trying to think of some of the other guys they had there, but I remember coming in there and working 4 or 5, 6 days in a row, and then I had a couple days off, and I worked 2 more weeks, and then I left. But it was funny because they had about 3 different bookers, so nobody knew what the hell was going on. I mean, they had Ole Anderson, and they had another guy, I think of it, and then Barnett was the head guy there, and I remember him calling me to his office, and he said to me, Jimmy, he says, the turning point in your career. He said, what do you want to do? And I said, Jim, I want to make the most money I can. And I said, the only way you can money is you got to be a champion of some sort, either a Mid-Atlantic champion or a world champion or a tag team champion. But I said, I'm going to go back to AWA. I miss it. And I said, AWA was great. You only wrestled 14 times a month. So he said, Jimmy, he says, if you go back to Daddy Vern, he said, you will be the biggest mistake in your career. And I said, Jim, I'm sorry, I got to go back, because I said my wife is from there, and it's my home, and we got 2 kids now, young kids, 3 and 1 years old. So I go back. They put Greg and I back together, and we had the biggest year. they had us go against Jesse and Adrian for the, they were the East-West connection, and they gave us the belts. And I made almost $87,000, and that was the biggest year of my career. So the next time I saw Barnett, he was in New York, and he said, "Oh, Jim, now you come to New York, huh?" And I said, "Yes, Jim." I said, "I just want to tell you one thing." And he says, "What's that?" And I said, "I made the best move ever going back to Minneapolis, because I made the most money I ever made in the career." And he says, "Oh boy," and he walked away.
Look, I got to ask you this, that you brought up Barnett, right? So again, we're just fans, but you hear the stories. We love Tommy Rich and stuff like that. When you meet Barnett, he calls you in the office, right? I'm assuming you hear the Tommy Rich stories. Are you like, oh boy, is this like I'm in trouble right now, or what's like running through your head?
He says, he closed his eyes when I kissed him.
Oh.
It was so much fun, but I mean, Barnett was a crazy guy, God, and he was the luckiest man, because I don't think he knew anything what he was doing, but he had a lot of talent with him, and then he made a fortune in Australia, a fortune. I mean, he brought guys in there, and they were making hundreds of thousands of dollars a month, and it was just, and then then he winds up working in New York, and I thought, holy Jesus, ay.
Well, you think about it, that was maybe one of McMahon's smartest moves, taking him up there, right? That kind of helped him out get going with the whole thing. Listen, before we keep going, I want to hit a news article. I need you to weigh in. Jesse Ventura, your friend and mine, endorses Kamala Harris, speaks out against Trump as a draft dodger, and rips into Hulk Hogan for ratting him out as he tried to start a union. What's on Jesse's take on this upcoming election, Jim?
Well, I don't want to get really into the politics, but I agree with him. And the reason why is because I remember in 1986, we did a shot at Trump's casino. We had WrestleMania there, and we were there the whole week. And it was a free for all, and Vince McMahon wanted to be part of the show, so he did a song and dance, and I couldn't believe it. Bobby Heenan and I were sitting together in the audience, and I think it was, Vince had a song, was "Don't Mess With Me" or something like that, and he did a song and dance, and when he did it, I started laughing so damn hard. And I looked at Bobby and I said, "Can you believe it?" I said, "This guy is our fucking boss," and Bobby started laughing uncontrollably. But the deal about Trump was his wife Ivanka was there, his first wife. She was so nice. I think there was 20 of us wrestlers that wrestled on the card at his casino. She walked down the line and shook all of our hands and thanked us for being there. Well, Mr. Bone Spurs comes by. He has three bodyguards on each side, and he wouldn't shake our hand. He just said, like, "Thanks for coming.
Jimmy,
we're going to make a lot of money." Yes.
You jump too much. Little too much jumping. Little too much on the jump. Little too much on the jump.
That's great.
All right, so let me get this straight, though. Mike, I hate to do this, and I know he doesn't want to talk politics, but you agree with Jesse because Trump was mean to you? I just want to, you can say yes, you can say no, you can say shut up, Pharaoh. I'll accept all three.
No, but you look at the past. You look what he's done. He's the most litigated person in this world. He from the time he was 30 until the time he was 60, he had 3,000 litigations against him in New York. He was a defendant.
I will admit, mathematically, that is more than the preacher from Nazareth. I'll give you that.
That's another thing. And then
I'll give you that.
I got banned from a local newspaper here because, people were comparing Trump to Messiah, Messiah, because he was going to lead all these people that have been wronged all their life and through his presidency. And I said, well, if you go to Revelations book 1, I says, they'll talk about what they call the Antichrist. and Donald Trump fits the Antichrist perfect. I'll just let it go like that.
Well, Mike, I think I know how it feels.
I love it. I love it. I love it.
Hey.
Well, I really think Kamala Harris is going to win. I really do, and I hope so, because if you look at anything in Project 2025, you'll see they want to get rid of vaccinations. They want to get rid of the Department of Education. They want to get rid of Medicare, our lifeblood. How many people depend? I depend on Medicare. Do you? Are you there yet?
No, I'm not.
We're not. We're getting close, but we're not quite there.
Wait a minute. My doctor, Dr. Keith Richards, who was in the rolling kidney stones, recommended that I continue to smoke my Camel non-filters. I'm not ready for no Medicare.
Jesus.
Get this out of here, Medicare.
Jim, is it fair to say though? Pharaoh says it the best. Growing up, we had Ronald Reagan. Now we have these two.
Right. How about that?
I will say that Joe Biden did a lot of great things for this country and doesn't get credit for it. And I'm glad that he realized that he was too old and he was on, being a little senile. And I'm glad he went back down and let Kamala Harris, be the president or vice president or president, nominee. So, I just hope and pray that everything goes well.
We'll find out. We will find out.
Jimmy's looking at me with a big frown on his face.
Nope.
Okay.
Nope. I'm not frowning, but I did want to ask you about one thing, though, that does bother me, okay?
What's that?
Why is it that, and you got to please meet me halfway here, or I may just jump. I may jump over this table. Why on earth is Donald Trump, no matter how you may feel about him, no matter what his past is or his 4 years in the White House was, I'm adopted and raised in a Jewish household. When I hear Donald Trump and Adolf Hitler in the same sentence, I want to vomit. Is it wrong for me to feel that way? 6 million people killed in the Holocaust.
Yeah.
World wars. He was going to move into the Middle East, into Africa. I didn't see that happen during Don's 4 years. Is it wrong for me to be offended when I hear Adolf Hitler and Donald Trump in the same sentence?
No, I think what they're trying to say is that some of the rhetoric that Trump has said, as far as he would let Putin, have, the Ukraine, and he wouldn't do this and he wouldn't do that. And then he wants to kick out a lot of the people that, in our different togetherness in terms of fighting,
So the comparison is not fair, but the paranoia is very real.
I think so.
Thank you.
But
that's fair.
I think you're right. But I do think that people have to be afraid if Trump were to be elected.
Fair enough.
My wife just said that's enough. So she turned the lights on me.
She turned the lights off. She's mad at you. Don't talk. Listen, this is the great.
Oh, Jim's going dark. Wait a minute. What's that in the background?
This is one thing I love.
What is that?
This is one thing I love about this country, and I love about people. When you can have an intelligent conversation without anybody screaming at each other or are trying to embarrass each other. That's the most important part, right? Because the one thing I would say, whether you're on Trump's side or not on Trump's side, the fact of the matter is, when he was president for the 4 years, people who never gave a shit about politics all of a sudden gave a shit about politics. And that meant something. At least people cared. All I know is this, and before we'll continue on, I'll just make this statement. No matter who you're voting for, they really don't give a shit about you, and Brunzell, and that's the facts. So it's like, just try to get whatever you can from it, and let's hope we live our best lives. Jimmy, take it from here.
Amen. Absolutely. All right, let's switch gears. Wow, talk about making a sharp right-hand turn. We've had Greg Gagne on. We've had Brian Blair on the show. We love both of them. It was awesome to finally get Greg on recently on Monte the Pharaoh. You guys can look that up in the library. But both of them have said that they think they're teaming. Their one common bond is you, obviously. They're teaming with you, their version, whether it was Killer Bees or High Flyers, their version should be in the Hall of Fame. So I'm going to put you on the spot. You have to choose one of the two. Which one of the two does Jumpin' Jim Brunzell pick between the choice of Gagne with the with the High Flyers, or Blair with the Bees? What do you say?
Jimmy, I'll tell you, it was very hard. It was a different situation with each teammate. When I wrestled in the AWA with Greg, you couldn't have a bad match. I mean, we had great talent to work with, and we made them look good. They made us look good, and consequently, we had 5-6 years of tremendous following and making money. Then, when Brian and I get to the WWE, nobody wanted to put anybody over or sell for them because they were afraid they would look bad. So it was like it was like going to the dentist without Novocaine and getting 2 teeth pulled every time you worked in the WWE. So it was hard. Brian and I should be in the WWE Hall of Fame, and I will say this, it's my fault that we're not, because Vince McMahon and I never got along. I didn't like him one bit. I made it known to him that we sued him for $100,000 and we won, because he in our original contract we were supposed to get 25% of the gross from outside income, and this was the first dolls that they came out with, the action figures.
Okay,
he paid us 8% of the net instead of 25% of the gross. He owed there was probably 12 guys he owed hundreds of thousands of dollars to.
Well, Jim, let me ask this question though. What's more important, $100,000 or being in the Fugazi Hall of Fame? Which one do you choose?
Well, I take $100,000, and that's what I told Brian. But Brian says, for some reason or other, Brian thinks, God, the Hall of Fame. I says, well, we'd be going in with? We'd be going in with Liberace, and then Mike Tyson, and Muhammad Ali, and then
Corey Wilson.
But to be not joking around anymore. Me and Jimmy were speaking about this. You're one of the greats in the profession, and obviously it's about making money. But at the end of the road, you do want to be recognized in something like that as being one of the all-time greats. I do understand that. Would you agree?
I agree. I don't think the WWE is a great account of that, because, like I said, they gave people that never wrestled. Yeah, I mean, the Rock and Roll Express were good, but they never wrestled in the WWE. And they get there, and it just I don't know. It's just something. Brian and I and Greg and I are also in the Iowa Pro Wrestling Hall of Fame. Dan Gable, and it's Lou Thez and George Tragos, and then we're in the Canadian Hall of Fame. We're in the Cauliflower Alley Hall of Fame, and actually the only other thing that means anything is the WWE. And the reason why it does is because they pay you $10,000. They give you $10,000, and then they fly you in, and they make a big deal, and you give a speech, and Blah blah blah. So
Yeah,
that's it.
unless your name is Wahoo McDaniel or Bruiser Brody,
Yeah, that's
then they
right.
slip you in. Then they slip you in through the back door and don't notify any of the families.
Oh, I know it. I know it.
Guys,
So I had to get that out. Sorry.
I got to slip in a question from a fan.
Yeah.
Phil DeCesare, he's asking out there. He's putting you on the spot, Jim. So I don't,
Right.
this is a tough one. He says, Jim, why didn't you answer the letter I sent you when I was 12 years old, 5'3", 120 pounds, when I wanted to be a wrestler? How come you didn't answer his letter?
Oh my God, Phil! What the hell, Mr. President?
Well, here's the deal. I forgot most of what happened yesterday, and that must have been years ago. But it's funny. I answer a lot of letters that I get.
Wow,
weekly.
You crushed Phil's hopes and dreams. What's going on here, Mike?
Here's the deal. What bothers me the most is I get fans who write me, a nice letter, and then they say, "Can you please send me an autographed picture?" But then they don't send a return address with an envelope on it. And then I give them, I wind up sending them a postcard. That cost me 55 cents, and then some of them will send me those cards, just a blank card, and they want me to sign it, and then they put it on all your pictures and sell the pictures.
Yes, right. There you go.
I said I never signed those cards. Sorry, I said.
By the way, when we're in studio and on the table is your book, which I love. I've read it twice. You did such a wonderful job with that. It is a great book. All right, listen, Jim. Here's the thing. I've been waiting for a long time, right? And here we go. Vince McMahon, in a lot of trouble. I need to know what Jim Brunzell thinks with the whole Janelle Grant thing and everything that was going on with Vince McMahon and his release from TKO. What are your thoughts on that entire situation?
Well, I'm just going to say what I said to Hulk Hogan years ago when there was some scuttlebutt about Vince trolling for young boys in a certain locale in New York. And I heard about it, and I said to Hulk, I says, Jesus, I says, Terry, I says, is this true? He says, I can't believe it. And Terry Bollea told me, he said, Jim, he said, Vince McMahon is capable of anything and everything. And then that's the way he left it. So that's the way I'm going to leave it with you. Wow. And I know that he's got a reputation as far as paying off women that he had a sexual relation with. I think there's like 4 women and he's paid like $20 million. So, and I know Linda left him, and I'm sure she she's cutting that $3 billion in half and probably whatever. But I think, personally, I think Vince is a very sick man, and that's it. That's all I'm going to say. And at the end, he will get just judgment.
Fair enough.
Yeah, you know what? That's a great, honest statement, and I really appreciate you, being as forthcoming as you are with that. That's a tough question. You put yourself in a tough situation considering the amount of friends you probably still have in the industry, and some may still remain close with McMahon. So,
Brian, if Brian Blair hears this, he'll call me and he'll say, Jimmy, thanks a lot. Now we'll never get into the damn WWE Hall of Fame.
Right. Sad, but probably true. Jim, to get back to that comparative that you really didn't give us a definitive answer to, on the back of the baseball card, because I'm kind of nerdy that way, I would have to say that the High Flyers deserve to be in more than the Killer Bees. But that's just me. Any thoughts on that?
Well, I just want to say, even though Brian Blair and I did win a world championship with the American Federation Wrestling, whatever it was, back in the late 80s, early 90s. But, Greg and I were twice AWA World Tag Team Champions, and we had some incredible talent. I mean, You look at those guys: Ray Stevens, Pat Patterson, Nick Bockwinkel, Bobby Heenan, Jack Lanza, Bobby Duncombe. I mean, Ken Patera, Adnan El Casey. I mean, the Crusher, Mad Dog Vachon, who said to me one time, he just walked up to me during TV, Maurice Vachon, and he looked at me and he says, "You know, Jimmy," he says, "there's nothing worse than a human bite." And then he walked away.
All right, Jim. Another hard right turn. Here we go again. It's an uncomfortable question, uncomfortable subject. But on this channel for years now, we've had to deal with the opinion from certain fans that Chris Benoit did not do these murders, that he's innocent. We even had the unfortunate experience of having to deal with, just as Kevin had passed away, people still writing comments on our channel and on our pages about how Kevin did it. Is there anything you'd like to say to these wrestling fans who have this sort of opinion on the Benoit murders, which obviously my partner and I feel that he was a piece of shit at the end of the day that killed his family, but that's our opinion. What's yours?
Well, to be honest with you, I never met Chris Benoit. We never met, in any of the territories. It was sad when I heard about that. And when I look back at it and think of it, I think it is just probably a product of the wrestling business. I was good to the wrestling business, and I tried to do everything I could to protect it. And the wrestling business is built on greed and deceit, and a lot of the guys get carried away. And it just so happened in that era when drugs were really prevalent, a lot of guys, I mean, there was a lot of suicides, there was, overdoses, and it was just part of this business called professional wrestling. And that's the way I feel. I'm so lucky that I survived it, because there was a lot of stuff that I did too. I did a lot, some drugs, and all of us did, the steroids and the cocaine and the painkillers and the sleeping pills. You had to do it because, for 3.5 years, Brian Blair and I, as the Killer Bees, wrestled 27 days a month for 3.5 years. And we went 53 days without a day off. And Khosrow, the Iron Schnook, he went 93 days without a day off.
Wow.
You cannot work that way and not have it take a toll on your mind and your body.
To the point of murder, though. See, that's where I want to defend the business, believe it or not. Maybe it's just my love for the business. I don't know it the way you do, never would claim to. But for me, I cannot turn around and say, well, it's the business, when a man decides that he's going to murder his family.
Well, I agree, but at the same time, what led him to that final act? I mean, was it 25 years of being on the road, taking bumps, kicks to the head,
right?
Abnormal amounts of additives into your body, drugs, painkillers?
Jim, I guess my point is, isn't it still a choice? He made a choice at the end of the day. Mick Foley has taken more chair shots than Chris Benoit will ever see. The late New Jack, who probably did expire from all of the painful blows he took in the business, he said it himself. He said,
Jimmy, but I think, not to interrupt you, Jimmy, but I think the other question I would have for Mr. Brunzell is this: why do wrestling fans? Look, I understand it's your business, and wrestling fans love you like we love you, right? But
sure.
Why do wrestling fans make excuse for horrific acts? Why do they always look for something else to blame than the actuality of what went on? What is it with the wrestling fan that, when OJ, was arrested, you didn't hear football fans going, that guy ran for 500 yards. He didn't do it. It was somebody else.
That's true.
But you just get excuses that, Vince McMahon set him up. Kevin Sullivan did it. Why do wrestling fans act like this?
Good question.
It is a good question. And I think they justify their opinion basically not really knowing that wrestling is a make-believe world.
Hmm.
And
Right.
whatever happens in that if it's make-believe, you can justify it one way or the other.
Right. So if
So
Kevin Sullivan had been a Bob Backlund his whole career instead of a menacing dark figure of satanic persuasion, maybe we wouldn't be having this conversation.
that's very possible.
Interesting.
Wow.
As long as he had a case of beer, Jimmy.
Well, gotta have that. You gotta stand on your head after 24 beers, like Mr.
Right.
Backlund did.
Oh,
There you go.
I'm swinging it this way. So behind me is a picture of who I consider one of the greatest tag teams of all time, the East-West Connection, Ventura and
Yeah.
Adonis.
Oh
And
yeah.
obviously, that I agree with Jimmy. As much as I love the Killer Bees, I love Gagne, Brunzell, the High Flyers, right? Because they were the mortal foils for the East-West Connection, or vice versa. But Adrian Adonis, huge fan of Adrian Adonis. We've had so many wrestlers in here. We had Adonis's daughter on, who was a wonderful person, Angie. But we've had yourself, Gagne, Patera.
Mm.
But Adonis gets mixed reviews as a human being.
True.
Maybe we'll talk a little bit about the Spivey altercation, but was Adrian Adonis a good guy, Jim, or was he a bully? And you worked with him a lot. What was he like?
Adrian was very good in the ring. He had his timing, his bumps, his psychology were, second to none.
Oh
and
yeah.
When he and Jesse became the East-West Connection, I mean, what Adrian lacked in his ability on the microphone, Jesse just blew it out of the water. But Jesse couldn't work a lick compared to Adrian, so they complemented each other. But here's again the problem. The problem is drugs. Adrian got way involved with drugs. I mean, he was a big coke guy, and he also dabbled with the painkillers and also the sleeping pills. But I know for a fact that he would be on a binge, on a coke binge for 2 or 3 4 days, and then he'd have a couple days off, and he'd sleep, and then he'd eat like a two-headed alligator. And he wound up putting on like 50 pounds when he was in the WWE, and I thought, holy God, because he weighed about 245 when he was in Minneapolis with Jesse, and God, what bumps he could take, and he was just great. But then when he got to WWE, which was, I don't know, 5 or 6 years later, he was 300 pounds, and his timing was off a little bit. He still was good in the ring, but the substance abuse ruined him, period.
Jimmy, before you go further, I want to ask Mr. Brunzell this question. I want to go back a little bit because we were talking about Benoit, and I was just thinking. So when Greg was on, we asked him about this, and he actually told a story. So I wanted you to weigh in. When we talk about bad people in the industry, someone whose name should never be left out is rock and roll Buck Zumhofe. What was your experiences with Buck Zumhofe when he wrestled around you guys in the AWA? Did you guys know that he had this flavor for young children? And you're a God-fearing guy, Jim, and certainly, I love you, man. You're a good guy. You can tell you're a good guy. How did you handle that? Didn't you want to rip the dude's face off?
Well, he was in the AWA, and they put him over as rock and roll, and he got over good. And Buck was a sick man. He was a sexual deviant, and to be honest with you, I blame some of the promotions that were involved with him, because they knew this was happening, and he had been, arrested a couple times, and he was stopped, and put in jail, and then let go, and this and that. And to me, that was his problem. And I remember when he got sentenced to 30 years, and he's in Stillwater prison here in Minnesota. And I sent him a letter, and I told him, I said, Buck, I said, I feel bad, for your situation, but you brought it on yourself. And I said, would you mind if I, would come and visit you, just to talk to you and, bring you a little bit of, friendship. And he told me, he said, nope. He said, don't come and see me never again. So I didn't. So I know he's still there, and he was, it is what it is. I mean, he was a
Would you say
sexual pervert.
Would you say he has no accountability? Why wouldn't he want to talk to you? You are someone from the days when,
because he's ashamed of his action, and he knows that he has nothing he can say that would, make it, make it right. He knows he's a pedophile, and it's just something he's going to have to live with, and he's doing it. I know he's probably got at least 10 more years, and he'll be, let's see, he was about 6 years younger than me. He'll probably be 80 some years old if he gets out of there. Yeah.
Right. Wow.
It was a shame, man. I mean, and promoters that knew him and sort of brushed it underneath the, table.
So Vern was aware. Vern Gagne was aware of this stuff.
I think so.
Oh boy. Well, a bad story with a bad ending. We've had we've had Greg Gagne on, as we've said. He told a story on the show about before Hogan jumped ship with the AWA, he was about to have a deal with CBS, which would carry Hogan versus Bockwinkel for the title. Is there any truth to that, as far as you would know?
I have no idea. Greg has told me that, but I'll say this. The main reason I believe that Hulk Hogan never got the AWA belt from
infuriating to a fan, infuriating.
Here's the reason why, is because Vern Gagne was the original, world champion. He was an all-American guy. He was a football player. He was a national wrestling champion, Olympic member, and he could not tolerate the fact putting the AWA heavyweight wrestling championship on a bodybuilding guitar player. He just would never do it.
He was old school and doomed to fail if he could have looked into the looking glass.
He would have made millions of dollars. And if he would have given Terry the belt, the WWE never would have been able to make a Hulkamaniac. I mean, Vince would have never, Terry was the golden goose. Vince McMahon could not have done what he did without him. He was just boom.
Well, Jim, let me ask you this. If Vern had made that move, do you still think Hogan would have jumped anyway?
No. You know why? Because Terry was Minnesota, because he only had to work 14 times a month.
Right.
He loved it here. He said, "I got time off." He says, "It's a beautiful."
But what about the money Vince obviously had that Vern never had? Do you think that Hogan would have been like, the belt's more important than the easy schedule, than the money?
Well, I don't know. I think that remains to be seen. What would have happened? When Hulk was here and he had great matches with Nick Bockwinkel. I mean, and they set record after record after record. And Vern never made that much money.
Right.
He never made so much money. So I think that the fact that if he thought, well, if Hulk Hogan's got the world championship, my belt, it would kill his ego. And that's what he was thinking of. I know it.
Let me ask you this, Jim. Why did Vern? Here you are. You were a great athlete. Greg was a great athlete. How come Vern never put the belt on either one of you?
Yeah, why a 45-year-old Nick Bockwinkel instead of some up-and-comers like yourselves?
Well, I know my own idea on that is the fact that he would never. I had 3 1-hour draws with Nick Bockwinkel in Winnipeg, St. Paul, and Denver, and they were tremendous matches. Honest to God, they were. And I mean, he beat the shit out of me, and I was out of breath. And Nick was 20 years older than me, at least.
Right.
But I realized I would never get the AWA belt because I was a partner with Greg, and Greg will never get the AWA belt, is because, first of all, he only weighed 200 pounds at the most, and he was Vern Gagne's son,
Right.
so that wouldn't have got over. So it was hard. I tell you, being Greg Gagne, the son of Vern Gagne, was the hardest position for a wrestler to have, because Vern was, there was so many promoters and wrestlers that were jealous of Vern Gagne in that, 60s, 70s and early 80s. And if Greg would have gone, like Greg hardly left the AWA, we went down to Atlanta, Georgia for 2 weeks and had sensational matches. God, we had great matches. But the fact is, they wouldn't bring us back. And I think it was because Ole Anderson just thought, well, I can't have these guys from Minnesota, outshining us and drawing better than, our homegrown, the Southern boys. And also the fact is they didn't want to deal with Vern. And Vern would demand, like, I want, give him 15 grand a week. And then I want 5 of it, And in reality, we got 2 grand a week, and he probably got 10.
He got 10. Jesus. So here, before we get to the Pharaoh's final question, here's my most important question. Are you ready? Do you still have a Killer Bee mask, and do you once in a while run around the house wearing it?
Jumping.
I the only time I wear it is 2 occasions. When I make a bank withdrawal, and then also when I on Halloween evening. I open the door and the kids look at me and they run. I got my jacket on and my boots on and my mask on, and I go,
yeah, but the bank teller goes, "Oh, it's Jim Brunzell again. Hey Jim, how are you?"
Can I Would you mind?
No, serious question. No. How come Vince, instead of Blair, how come Vince didn't bring Gagne in with you?
I just think that, Greg wouldn't have fit in, and the reason being, there was so many big guys in the WWE at that time. And, I weighed 230, and there was guys, that we were working with that were, 280 and 290. And I just think that it would have been trouble for the fans to buy Greg. Greg had wrestled in Madison Square Garden a couple times as a favor, to Vern from, I think it was Vince Sr. And Greg had a good match, but he worked with Johnny Rodz. And Johnny Rodz is a little, I don't know if you guys heard about him, but he was sort of a up and down guy in New York back in the, I'd say the middle 70s.
We're big fans of Johnny Rodz. Had him on.
Yep.
Johnny Rodz
He's a legend.
Was the litmus for all you guys, right?
He didn't want to make a 190 pounder look good,
Right.
And consequently they didn't have a good match. And
wow,
said, God dang! And he said that Johnny Rodz, he didn't want to do shit. And I said, well, I said he lives there, and
Well, he's unpredictable.
Yes, he was. I never met him, but I heard that. I heard about him.
Yeah, he's a legend in these parts, brother. Johnny Rodz, for sure.
I want to get something we call
the. Johnny's still with us. He's asking if Johnny's still with us. Yeah,
I think he had quadruple bypass, triple bypass. Johnny's an icon, man. I like all you guys. You guys, I got to tell you, it's wrestling is still wonderful, but to me, it's not nearly what it used to be. And what you guys have done, it's amazing. Jim, we're going to hit you with Pharaoh's final question again. How much we appreciate you and your honesty, and you're a pretty incredible human being, and it is always an honor to have you on this show. Jimmy, Farrell's final question for Mr. Brunzell.
Okay, Mike, you'll like this. It's not a wrestling question, and it's not about which underwear he wears, by the way, Mike. But I know that Jim's a musician. I've heard Jim's stuff. Jim is definitely a serious musician, loves his music. Now, Jim, being that you were born in 1949, there's a comment that was once said to me by a woman that I used to work with, who she's probably not around anymore. This was 20 years ago. She would probably be about 90 at this point. She was still working past her Social Security. She was a hard worker, an old school girl. And she said something that I could never shake. Now, being born in 49, that would make you 14 going on 15. To get to the point, she said to me, because we were talking about life and what it was like back in those days in the 40s, the 50s, the 60s, because she knew. And she said to me that nothing was ever the same. And Pandora's box was ripped wide open when those four lads from Liverpool landed at JFK Airport. So my question to you is, as a musician, what was it like experiencing the birth of the Beatles in America in 1964?
Well, they changed music. They changed the whole rock and roll. They changed the world, really, with their unique blend of harmonies and their writing. They were the greatest band of all time, really. And I never did get a chance to see them, but I liked a lot of their music. You know, right now I'm a huge Bruce. I've been a Bruce fan for since 1974, and I've seen Bruce 49 times.
Wow.
In 14 cities and 2 countries.
Wow.
And in November, I'm going up to see him in Winnipeg, Canada. And I just am amazed at him. And I'm amazed at a lot of guys. I see my son saw the Rolling Stones at Wrigley Field 3 weeks ago or 4 weeks ago in Chicago. And my son's 48 years old. And he says, you know, Dad, he says, I'm just not really a Rolling Stones fan. He says, after the third or fourth song, he says, I was, you know, sort of wanting to go home. And I said, well, I said, you saw one of the greatest bands ever. I saw the Rolling Stones 3 times. And to listen to them now on this Hackney Diamonds, their new LP, you know, the guys are all close to 80 years old. And they still have that unique sound.
It's a good record.
Oh God,
it's a good record.
Yeah.
I got to know now. What is your favorite Bruce song?
Prove It All Night live version. There's about
Nice.
3 or 4. His guitar. Matter of fact, I went and saw him in Chicago, and I was guest of Andy Frain's Security, and I saw him at a small theater, and I want to say it was East something theater, and I came in and I went to Will Call and I said, my name's Jim Brunzell and there's 3 tickets for me here. And they says, geez, I'm sorry, there's not. And I said, you got to be kidding me. And I said, Andy Frain, the security people told me that I would have 3 tickets. So they said, oh, well, wait a second. So they make a call and this guy comes up and he says to me, come on, follow us. So they walked us down right in front in the orchestra pit. Nobody was there, right in front of Bruce's microphone. And Bruce came out and played Prove It All Night. And he does about a 7-minute guitar solo and blew me away. I just went, oh my God, I've never seen anything like it. And I thought, this guy is incredible. He was absolutely incredible. I mean, and I've got to know him, and he's taken time with my family, and he's just a superlative, you know. And he's had a rough time. He had a bad back, and he took way too many of the ibuprofen and wound up getting a peptic ulcer. And then he lost his voice a month ago, and now he's recuperating and coming back. But I can't wait to see him in Winnipeg. You know, I think this might be his last tour because he'll be 75 in September.
Yeah.
And by the way, I recommend people out there, if you could catch Springsteen with Howard Stern, one of the great Springsteen interviews around. Jim, before we go, I do have one last question for you. If I was going to ask you in your wrestling career, not your personal life, what was your your favorite accomplishment in wrestling, and what's your biggest regret?
Oh, geez. Well, I think my biggest regret is that I didn't quit wrestling earlier. I should have quit it earlier, and because it was starting to take a toll on my body. I've had 13 surgeries since I left wrestling, and I'm having trouble walking now with my knees. I've got neuropathy from my knees down to my toes. I've had both shoulders replaced, both knees, one hip, elbow. I had a hernia. I had a blood clot taken out of my testicle, and I'm having what they might call early onset a little dementia. So I'm taking medication for that, and I think the best thing that happened to me in my life and wrestling career was my wife, Mary, because she held everything together, when I was gone all the time. And I have two wonderful kids that have been just brilliant. I mean, I couldn't ask for no trouble, no nothing, and I got two grandkids, both soccer players, and one's playing in college in Lake Erie State in Ohio, and he's 19 years old. And the other one, matter of fact, when I came in, I just watched my junior, his name's Becca James, and his name's Babish, and he's 16 years old, and he's captain as a junior on his high school team, and they won 1-1. And I just got back here just in time to eat. I told Mary, I said, God, I got to eat. I hadn't eaten since 12, and then it worked out okay. And I want to thank you guys. I enjoy doing these. It's fun, and it's always good to talk to people that have an interest in wrestling, and the fact that it's had on them through their life. I mean, wrestling to me is, when I think of the entertainment value and the different division between good and evil, and the good trying to beat the evil, and then the timing that's involved, and the personalities that are involved. You just find that anymore.
Listen.
You look at the AEW and the WWE. Everybody's a badass. Nobody sells. There's no timing involved. There's no story to it. All it is a boom, 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 false finish, high spot, high spot, high spot. Another guy runs in the boom. They ring the bell, disqualification. Boom. That's it. I can't watch it anymore, and I feel bad because people say, and I've heard this from a lot of people. They say, Jim, wrestling is not what it used to be when you were there. And I agree. And I said, it's morphed into this, and it's morphed into this by the promoters who want to make more money, and they want to cash in on opportunities on, computer games. They have computer games now with wrestling, and they're making money. So they want to do that. And the computer games is bing, 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 boom.
I think it's the important part you're saying there, Jim, too, is I think today's wrestler doesn't look at the end of their career and saying, hey, where do I end up at the end of it, right? They think about the money, where earlier on we spoke about there's an end game. I mean, to be honest with you, when you talked about Brian Blair looking at his life and going, I really want to be in that Hall of Fame, I get it. And I understand your points on it too, but I get it. You want to be recognized for being as great as you are. And again, we try to do the best we can here. People have to remember the Jim Brunzells of the world, because these are the guys that molded this entire billion-dollar industry now. And again, people should realize what an honor it is to be able to listen to a great Jim Brunzell sharing his feelings, whether it be on politics, wrestling, religion. This guy is gold, just as the rest of them. So again, I think we opened up, and we'll say it again, Jim, you are a treasure to wrestling. You're a treasure to the world. And we consider you a friend. And all we could say is thank you for all you've done for us and wrestling fans.
Well, I appreciate the time you gave me, and I appreciate your love of this business, and I did love the business. Even though I figured I survived it. It was a hard business. It was a very demanding as far as your family, and like I say, I survived it, and I thank the good Lord every day that I'm upright, and I wish peace and happiness to everybody.
Jimmy Pharaoh, send us out. Thank you again, Mr. Brunzell.
Thank you.
You've been watching Monte and the Pharaoh with Jumpin' Jim Brunzell, and until next week, later.
Later.